Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with meat sauce. That's right, this meat-based pasta sauce goes by many names. Red sauce, Sunday sauce, red gravy. But no matter what you call it, it's one of those basic recipes that everybody needs to know. And of course, by recipe, I mean procedure, because this is really not technically a recipe, because I change the ingredients every time I make it. But regardless of what specific ingredients you put in this, the procedure is always the same, and it goes a little something like this. So step one, we're going to brown some meat in the oven, in a roasting pan, with a little bit of olive oil drizzled in there. And I like to use a combination of beef, pork, and chicken. So I have one beef shank, I got a couple pieces of pork ribs, and I have a couple bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs. And basically any meat's going to work for meat sauce. But generally we're looking at those super tough, very flavorful cuts that need lots of time to cook, lots of connective tissue. So anyway, we're going to toss our meat in the pan. Like I said, we got a little bit of olive oil in there. And I'm just moving this around so it's all coated. But also, I kind of wanted to make the shape of a meat butterfly. And once we've picked a meat design we like, we're going to go ahead and pop that in a very hot oven. Let's go with 425. And we're going to roast that for about 20 minutes or so until it's very well browned. But I don't want you just to stand there waiting for it. What we can do while the meat's cooking is go ahead and prep our tomatoes. And of course I'm using the San Marzano tomatoes. You know that's the only thing we use for sauce around here. So I'm dumping some whole peeled plum San Marzano tomatoes into a bowl. And I'm going to crush those into a puree with my bare hands. And yes, I did shave my knuckles. Thank you for noticing. But anyway, we're going to get in there and we're going to crush that really fine. Of course, you could use some kind of food mill to do this perfectly smooth, or just buy the tomatoes already crushed. But one of my earliest kitchen memories is watching my grandmother do this in the kitchen with the tomatoes she would can herself. So I'm going to do it this way. Plus, every once in a while, you can find a little green stemmy thing and pull that out. But anyway, let's go ahead and crush our tomatoes so those are ready for when the meat comes out, which is right about now. So like I said, you're going to roast that meat for about 20 minutes or so, but don't go by time. Cook it until it looks like this. It must be thoroughly browned. So we're going to go ahead and set that meat aside, and we're going to start the sauce. So we're going to go ahead and put a nice big saucepan on medium heat with a nice splash of olive oil, and we're going to go ahead and throw in one diced onion with a big pinch of salt. And you know the drill. We're going to sweat that for about 5 minutes until it starts to turn translucent, at which point we're going to add a ton of garlic. Mine's chopped. If you want to slice it thin like that Goodfellas movie, go ahead. People will think you're a made man. But anyway, we're going to toss in our garlic, we're going to stir that in and cook that for about 1 minute. And after we've given that garlic a very brief cooking, we're going to go ahead and pour in our crushed San Marzano tomatoes. And then in addition to the plum tomatoes, I'm also going to add a couple big spoons of tomato paste. That's going to give it a little more body, a little deeper flavor. And then because this is going to simmer so long, I'm also going to pour in some water. So we'll give that a quick stir, and then it's time to introduce the meat, which as you just saw was browned beautifully. We're going to add that to the pot. And you're probably thinking, hey, I would deglaze that pan and add all those beautiful juices to the sauce also. Well, you know what? I like how you think. So we're definitely going to splash some water in the pan and put that over medium heat and work that over with a wooden spoon to deglaze the bottom. And could you use a splash of wine instead? Of course. Like I said, I switch this up all the time. Sometimes water, sometimes red wine, sometimes white wine, sometimes Marsala. All right, it depends on what you have around. But today was just water. And we're going to go ahead and pour that in. And if there was ever an example of the difference between a good cook and a very good cook, it's that splash right there. It's the willingness to do that little extra step for a little extra flavor that really does make the difference. So we'll go ahead and stir that in. And while we're waiting for this to come up to a simmer, let's season it up a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add some freshly ground black pepper, a little extra touch of salt, and some red pepper flakes. That counts as cayenne. And we'll stir that in. And as you can see this coming up to a simmer, I will add the last couple ingredients, which would be some freshly chopped Italian parsley and a little bit of Parmesan cheese. And by the way, there should have been a little more Italian parsley there, but I dropped half of it on the floor. Hey, that'll happen. You got to roll with the punches. But anyway, we'll go ahead and stir that in. And then as far as the rest of the recipe goes, it's incredibly easy because we really don't do anything. All right, as soon as this comes up to a simmer, go ahead and back your heat down to very low, and then simply let it simmer gently, uncovered, for 3 hours. Maybe give it a stir once in a while. Maybe add a splash of water if it looks like it's reducing too much. But other than that, there's nothing to do. And the beauty with letting something simmer for 3 hours, you have time to remember you have some Italian sausage in the freezer. So I thawed those out, I browned them up, and I added them to the sauce. All right, so the first rule of Meat Sauce Club is, of course, never mention Meat Sauce Club. But the second rule is always add any extra meat you have around. That's basically why this was invented. So I added some sausage, and I let that simmer another hour for 4 hours total, at which point you're probably done. And how you'll know, your meat will be completely tender and basically falling apart. All right, which mine is. So I'm going to go ahead and fish mine out into a dish. And yes, traditionally this meat is served separately. It's not mixed in with the pasta. But those are the Italians' rules, not mine. So I might mix mine later. And while that stuff's not going to win any braised meat beauty contests, it is absolutely succulent and delicious. And sometimes gelatinous. But anyway, we're going to remove and reserve our meat. And at that point, we're going to head back over to the stove to finish our sauce, which just entails two things. If it's a little thin like mine is, simply simmer it for a while. If it's a little thick, add a little more water. So once you take the meat out, you're going to adjust your sauce's texture by either reduction or hydration. And there you go. You can kind of see my final consistency. Not too thick, not too thin. And above and beyond the texture, of course, you're going to taste for seasoning, which is always done with a hunk of Italian bread. Do not taste it on a spoon, because you're going to eat this on pasta. Taste it with something starchy. So I dipped in my bread. I determined mine was delicious, but you might want to adjust your salt. All right, we all know you're the boss of the sauce, so you better start acting like it. And once we're happy with it, we're going to go ahead and serve that with some pasta. And like I said earlier, the Italians never serve the meat with the pasta, but happily I get to serve mine together because I'm an American. Of course, some extra sauce is not going to hurt. And as usual, we're definitely going to make it rain, Reggiano Parmesan. And that pasta with meat sauce is done. Sure, it takes a long time, but it's incredibly simple and the ultimate 2-for-1 deal. Not only do you get this incredibly rich, gorgeous pasta sauce, you also get all that amazing braised meat to go along with it. So I really do hope you give this a try. Remember, it's never too late to become an Italian grandmother. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.